Hi, students. Welcome back. I am excited to have my friend and advisory board member with us today, Todd Stanson. He is going to talk to us actually about two subjects. We're going to start off in this module with ethics, and then he's going to join us next module for governance as well. But Todd, can you just introduce yourself to the students, a little bit about your education background, whatever you want to divulge, and maybe one fun fact about yourself as well.
Sure, happy to, Joe. And first of all, thanks for asking me to participate with you on this. I think it's great. And hi to everybody. So I'm Todd Stanson. I am the general auditor for DCP Midstream. DCP Midstream is a subsidiary of Phillips 66, the global energy company. If you put gas in your vehicle, you likely would put Phillips 66 product in there. I have responsibility for a few areas. Ethics is one of them, enterprise risk management, and also the internal audit function for DCP. My educational background, I always like to joke a little bit and say I'm not an accountant. I actually have more of a finance background. Educationally, although my MBA is finance and accounting, so I do speak accounting, but I don't necessarily think of myself as an accountant. One of the things for me is in my that's my educational background. When it comes to my professional background, I've spent the bulk of my career in professional services. Both doing operational consulting and then also a lot of consulting related to corporate governance. So this is a great topic for me and something that I really like. And ethics is probably my favorite of all of the various things that I have. So in terms of a fun fact, when I was in high school, I worked at an ice arena. And among other things that I did at the ice arena, I learned to drive a Zamboni. That's the ice resurfacing machine that you may have seen if you've gone ice skating or perhaps gone to a hockey game or something. So that's my fun fact.
That's awesome. Well, Todd, now I'm going to think of you every time I go to a hockey game. I'm about to say soccer. I'm like, no, that's not right. Hockey. But my son played hockey and now he plays soccer. So that must be why I confused it.
There you go.
That's pretty cool. And thank you for that. And I think that's probably why you and I get along so well, is our passion for ethics. So you are the perfect person to talk about this and the next topic. And I want to start off right with the question of, when you think of ethics, when it comes to your organization or any organization, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear that word?
Well, when I think of ethics, I do what I think is always something important to do, is I try to look at what's the definition. In the case of ethics, I look at what's the root of the word ethics. And if you go and you do a little research on it, you'll find that comes from Greek, and it relates to pertaining to character. So what's interesting to me about that, not to get too philosophical about this, but it's a verb, it's not a noun. So what that means is we actually have to do something. We can't just think about it, but we actually have to take action. And so when I think about ethics, that's to me, I think one of the most important things. It's not a passive thing. So it's about how people act. Of course, people are part of organizations, so there's also an element of how organizations act. So when I think about ethics, I know in our organization, we try to simplify it because it is a very complex topic. But for discussion, I like to think about it in terms of doing that right thing and respecting others. And I think if we do those things, I think we'll be okay. Of course, doing the right thing, we have to know what that actually means. And that's understanding what's expected of us, whether that's policies or processes or procedures or whatever that is. But that's what comes to mind when I think about things.
Yeah, I love it. And you led us perfectly into what my next question was going to be, is because a lot of times when I think about ethics within an organization, my mind like goes right to the policy. And that seems to be kind of the go-to document when it comes to ethics. And I don't know about you and your career, what I've seen sadly in some cases is a really dry, boring, document that, maybe has a lot of legal terms and it's just not real. I don't know, not real conducive to having people at the organization really want to embrace the ethics policy. So I'd love to hear, you being in charge of ethics, how maybe you take a different approach or how you make ethics come to life within your organization.
Well, that's I think that's a really great topic and a way to think about it, because I think going back to, the conversation we just had, I think it has to be about action. So if people don't see it and think, wow, this is something I actually do something with, then it's not going to work. I think maybe unfortunately, in a lot of cases, the ethics policy and generally where that it takes shape in the form of some sort of a code of conduct. That's typically what we see. But sometimes those can be dry because, with no offense to the legal folks that I know we all get to work with, they tend to have the last say about it. So it tends to have some of that. But I think what we can do is make it more action oriented by putting things in a code like examples of things that people would actually deal with in their day-to-day work. One of the big ones, as an example of that, is conflict of interest. And as I think we probably are all aware, broadly speaking, conflict of interest is if you have an interest personally that might differ from what's in the best interest of the company, and you act in your personal interest. And that's something that sounds very almost theoretical, but we can try to bring it to life with saying things like, you have the ability to do business with the company because you have a side business, and you might put yourself ahead of the company's best interest. And so the code of conduct would give that as an example of saying, if you have a situation like that, talk to somebody and look at the situation and see, is there really a problem? So I think that's just an example of how we can take something like an ethics policy, quote unquote, that might be sort of dry and bring it to life so people can actually use and understand it.
Yeah, I really like that. And I know and you probably have some stories from your career, but one that immediately comes to my mind about exactly what you're talking about was an individual that we found having their own, and by the way, found as internal auditors. So we'll get into how we can actually get involved in ethics as internal auditors. But our department found a gal that was working in our company's marketing department that had a side marketing business. And, maybe it would have been okay had she disclosed it properly, like you're talking about, maybe, against the policy. However, she was using some of our proprietary materials as like examples of work that she had done. And some of it was for products that we hadn't even launched yet. And so obviously it became a pretty big case that internal audit got to work on. But I think that's a perfect example of how you can bring a dry subject to life. We actually used her, obviously not her name, for years to come after that as an example. And I think, it's really good where companies embrace some of these, maybe they're breaches of their code of conduct or their ethics policy, but they also show employees that, you will be held accountable to it and kind of here's what happened. So I love the idea of bringing it to life somehow. What about training around ethics at your organization? Because we are going to talk obviously about governance and I think training as a program is a huge part of governance in general, but any ethics training or in your experience, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think that similar to our discussion around bringing a code of conduct, for example, to life with practical examples, that's what we have found works really well when it comes to, quote, ethics training. I think it's a little hard to, quote, train people in ethics. It's easier to say, this is an example of something that you might find in your day-to-day work. And in the company I work with, we generally have two types of employees. We have people who are working in not an office environment and people who do work in an office environment. And sometimes the things that they deal with are very different. So we try to make it very real for people in their particular space. And what we have found to be really helpful is very short videos. And these videos, when I say short, 90 seconds maybe, but we actually use examples that have happened in the company. You brought up one, and we will take actual examples. We create animated videos, and that way it becomes realistic to people, but it's not finger pointing, because we certainly want to use it as a true learning experience. And we think that the best way to learn about ethics is to take an example of something that actually did happen that people can relate to and make it real. And hopefully that way, when they see something in the future in their particular environment, that they will say, aha, I remember, this is what I should do in this case.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love the 90-second video idea, because I actually got that from another organization that does something called an integrity minute. And, they like interview, and in the internal audit department, I think this is one way that we can maybe get involved, and I'll let you chime in on that, but just suggesting creative ways to bring these policies to life, like the ethics policy. Interviewing a leader and just saying, hey, what does ethics mean to you? And just getting their idea, and it kind of brings that person to life. And I was doing this for a client, and I actually had a leader say that the cashier forgot to ring something up, and he actually went back in, just a week ago. And so it kind of just brought to life the topic. And like this executive, it doesn't matter that they sit in the C-suite, they're going through the same ethical dilemmas that we face each and every day. And I thought it just kind of brought them down to, be a real person. So I really like that idea.
Yeah, wonderful idea.
Yeah.
So
So
I have to remember that. I like that.
yeah. So obviously we're talking about internal audit, or as we call it at MSU Denver, risk assurance and advisory. What can we do to get involved with organizational ethics? I think you're pretty unique, where it kind of falls under your purview as the general auditor. In any organization, though, what do you see as the way you can get involved? Maybe start having, auditing culture is a hot topic, right? How do we do that? How do you see us getting involved in that?
Yeah, I think that the first way is actually the easiest, but the most important. And I think that's leading by example. So it's in anything that a group does, that they're behaving in the appropriate way. It can't be this is the way we do it, but maybe that's not the best way to do it. I don't think that's the right way to go. I think it's trying to do everything that you can in the most appropriate way possible. So I think that leading by example is the first one. I think the second one is, I think an example is what you gave, Joe, which is getting involved in leveraging certain past experiences and saying, here's how we think you could use those past experiences, and whether those are put into videos or some sort of materials. But it's trying to be that advisor and saying, maybe doing some research for the group that's responsible for ethics to say, well, these are some, leading practices we saw. How does that fit into our organization? So I think being that advisor is really the second way, and probably the most fun way to actually be involved. And then, of course, I think the third way would be the, traditional providing that objective assurance over the program. So is it functioning in the way we want it to function, and being able to provide that perspective to either the business owner, the executive owners, or perhaps even the board / audit committee. So I would see those three ways that a group could get involved.
Yeah, I love those three. I think the only other things that I've seen that I would add, kind of, we've already really talked about it, is I think auditors could do some ethics training too. So depending on the organization, if your HR function or legal department, whoever maybe owns it, where it lives, I think there's some opportunity for auditors to get out in front of auditees in a different way. And I think that's kind of fun as well.
Absolutely.
Right? We can do all sorts of trainings. And I think that would be another example of what we could do. Well, I want to leave you, Todd, and the students with what I call my ethical mantra, which I think kind of starts or goes back to how we started today. And I had already told Todd that I have it framed on my desk. So this is my mantra, and it says, "Live so that you wouldn't be ashamed to sell the family parrot to the town gossip." So I think Todd, that kind of goes along with how you said ethics, it is how you want to behave, how you want to live. And I think the most important thing for us as auditors to remember, I'm probably going to butcher this quote, but I think it's David Brooks that said, "Never underestimate the ability of an environment to change your behavior or who you are." And he wrote that, and he's written a book called The Road to Character, and he's written a lot for the New York Times. But that really struck me as, you got to look at the organization as a collective of individuals behaving how they think is right. And that's what organizational ethics is. It's just that culmination. And so if we all have an ethical mantra like that, maybe we'd be better off at organizations. I don't know. That's just my thought on it.
That's great. I love that, Joe. Thanks for sharing that. I had not seen it articulated like that, so I won't forget it now.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, somebody gave this to me after I did an ethics presentation, and I framed it. So now I look at it every day. So
Wonderful.
yeah. Well, anyway, all right, we'll let the students go, and we'll be back with Todd for governance in the next module. But Todd, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on ethics with us.
Of course. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everyone.